Well, now you got into this mess by going down a waterfall. Now, how would you suppose we can get them out of there?
By going up the waterfall?
That's right. Anything's possible in Disneyland.
Welcome, friends, to episode 16 of Up the Waterfall podcast.
That's right.
With your hosts, Zanna and Scott Otis.
Hello.
That's us. Here we take a journey up the waterfall of Disney parks, history, facts, and nostalgia, with a present-day twist.
Yes.
And today is the first episode back after we took a little break for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Very busy time around here.
Quite.
But in addition to being the first episode of, I guess, our second season, if you want to call it that.
Sure.
We are going to start at the beginning, as it were, and tell the story of us.
Ooh.
And I think one of the most interesting parts of the Disney fandom is how we all got here. And we all got here from different ways and have different stories. And
That's right.
Our story ended up intertwining and becoming part of each other. So
That's right.
we're going to tell our stories, and then we hope that we'll hear from you guys and you can tell us your stories as well.
Because everyone has one.
Yeah. So without further ado, you're going to start.
Me? Well, I'll try to make this interesting. Okay, so where does it go from for me? It actually started way back in Anaheim. But actually, even before that, my folks actually they had a Midwestern upbringing. My father from Iowa and my mother from Nebraska, and actually Nebraska is where they met. And so whenever I would visit my grandparents' house, I would kind of get a feel for how an old Midwest town, a small Midwest town was, kind of like Walt, in a way. And so that's really the only personal insight that I have into kind of that small town Midwest thing, because I always grew up in a large area, because they moved to Orange County, California. And I was actually born in a hospital on Harbor Boulevard, the same street as Disneyland.
Wow.
Yeah. So I grew up in Orange County, California, right in the shadow of Sleeping Beauty Castle.
In Anaheim?
Very close. The hospital is in Fullerton. I lived in Placentia, but I literally lived just a stone's throw away from the Anaheim border, and I actually did throw stones. So I'm there.
Sounds like something you would do.
Yeah, because the railroad track would go right there, and the railroad track was in Anaheim, and my house was just on the other side in Placentia.
That's very dangerous. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah, well, I was a small boy, so that's what we did.
It was different in the 70s.
But, I mean, even back then, I had a view from my parents' bedroom window of the Disneyland fireworks. So, kind of like now.
That's crazy to think about for me.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't ever think about Disneyland.
But I didn't go to Disneyland as often as I go to Disney World now. So it was actually my parents' tradition to take each of us, because I'm the third of four, and I have three sisters. Our first trip to Disneyland was always on our fourth birthday. So that would have been 1974 for me to Disneyland. If you can think about that, that was just after its, 19th birthday? Yeah, so kind of in the early times of those. So I actually got to experience all of those fun early attractions that a lot of people are very nostalgic about, like such things as Adventure Through Inner Space, American Things, the American Journeys, even the, I can never remember the name of it.
Mine Train?
Through
Nature's Wonderland?
Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland. Thank you. So to me, that Tomorrowland especially, which opened in '67, that was kind of like that was my jam. That was my favorite part, was that Tomorrowland, because it was the world on the move. They still had the People Mover, the Submarine Voyage, the Skyway, America Sings, and all of that, and Adventure Through Inner Space, which was one of my favorites. So I grew up going to Disneyland, not super often, but enough where it was always a favorite of mine. And then at one point, I think, I can't remember which birthday, but my parents thought, hey, you should grow up. Let's go to Six Flags Magic Mountain. I think you'll really like it. And so they convinced me to go there on my birthday one year. And I actually did like it quite a lot, and that's kind of how I grew to love roller coasters. Because that was kind of like a big boy park with a lot of the, they had Colossus and the Revolution and the Gold Rusher and things like that back then. It's actually since grown up to be a huge roller coaster park, which I've gone back to a couple of times. But so that was slowly, for a brief time, kind of became my favorite thing, and actually lured me away from the Disney for just a brief while. But then, it's within me. So I was like, I don't think I want to go to Magic Mountain this year. Let's go back to Disneyland. They would say, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yes." So Disneyland became my thing. But then, in 1982, when I was 11 or 12, actually right around my 12th birthday, we moved to Texas. Right, they actually got a new job, or they got transferred to they were in the aerospace, with Rockwell.
That makes them sound like rocket scientists.
Well, they actually worked for the company that made the space shuttle orbiters. So we actually got to, I remember, tour the original Enterprise, which was the kind of the test space shuttle that they helped make. But anyway, their job got transferred to kind of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and that's where I moved when I was 12. And those were kind of the dark times because I was so far from Disney. No Disneyland there. But I would go to the libraries and try to, find as many books as I could on Disney or any kind of theme park, and found those books, and those were very entertaining. And I did convince my family in 1984 to come to Disney World for our first Disney World vacation. And that made a huge impression on me. As you can
We
tell.
talked about that in our Epcot series, I believe.
I believe it. Yeah, it was literally
How
on
we
that
both
trip
did.
when I said, "Yep, I'm going to end up here," and I was, just even less than 14 years old at that time. So, but that was '84. So we went to Epcot and the Magic Kingdom and the Village Marketplace, and that was just the best thing ever. But after vacation ends, I had to go back. And, I did go back to Disneyland a couple of times, but I actually got a job. My very first job was actually at Six Flags Six Flags over Texas, the original Six Flags, because it was the only thing nearby. And I actually made funnel cakes there for one season, the 1986 season, which incidentally is the only single calendar year in that entire span when I've never went to a Disney park. So even though I went to,
Dark times indeed.
Lived in Texas from '82 all the way through my high school or even college graduation in '92, in that 10-year span, I actually did manage to make it to a Disney park every year except for that one year in '86. But it was that year that I worked at Six Flags.
It's weird that you didn't end up in food services based on your teenage jobs of making funnel cakes and then serving ice cream.
It was an awesome job. I'll tell you what.
It sounds like a fun experience. Like someone should make a movie about how you were
just the kind of
vanned in.
Perfect first job for a high school kid. Just being able to go to a theme park, every day. And sometimes I would go there, and kind of stay longer, or go earlier just to be able to play in the parks. But it wasn't Disney, and so when I graduated high school, I wanted to go to the University of Florida, but we were not able to afford out-of-state tuition. So I went to the next best thing, what I consider the best in-state college was Texas Tech. So I went there from '88 to '92, graduated. But it was in the middle of that I actually worked at Disney World.
But not on the college
I didn't do the college program. Because I knew that there were three aspects to the college program. You had to, the work, and then there had the school aspect, and then living there. And I didn't really want to do that.
I didn't either, but I'll get to that.
I just wanted to work there. But apparently you can't just go there and show up at casting, which I did, and just say, hey, give me a job.
You definitely can't do that
now.
now.
What's your local address? And I say, oh. But incidentally, just the fluke of all flukes, the person who I just happened to know at the time, his sister worked in the casting building. And so when I used that person's name as kind of my reference, they said, are you related? Is this person related to this person who works right here? And so I assured them that I would get a local address, which I did get in the next couple of days, renting a room in a house. But yeah, so I worked here summers and Christmas seasons from in between my sophomore and junior years of college, basically every summer and Christmas season until I graduated.
You just drove out here?
Yep, that's right.
That's so crazy to me that you didn't ever work at Disneyland, having grown up right down the street. Was it just the lure of Epcot that you were like, I want to work here?
It was Epcot. But also, when we moved away from Disneyland in '82, I left no family behind. So
that's true.
But
you didn't have family in Florida.
That's true. I mean, that is very true. I guess it was just kind of the epic size of all of Disney World and Epcot that lured me. Because at that time, that was my thing.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, it was a huge deal. And so, just even kind of with the entire, the opening of Epcot, which I actually, exactly when Epcot opened, I was not aware of that. It was kind of like the year following when I read about this thing that everyone was talking about called Epcot, and that's when I started to investigate it more. Because when you're living in Texas, you don't have access to the internet. Because it's the early 80s. So I only had library books, to go see. And so eventually, that's when the Epcot book came out. And so I got that. And that's actually kind of what started my love of Disney books. So,
as mentioned in our Disney Books Epcot special. I don't know.
Right.
One of the Epcot things. You should listen to all of them if you haven't.
And actually, that brings me to a small thing where I actually have to go back. Because there was one thing when I did live in California. I remember going to the Orange Mall in Lincoln. I think it was on Lincoln in the Orange County, not in the city of Orange, in Orange County, California. There's the Orange Mall. And it was in the B. Dalton bookseller there that I happened to find a book on one of their display shelves that I looked at, and I just enthralled me. I remember it had fireworks on the cover, and I couldn't really remember everything about it, but just thumbing through it, it was just everything that I wanted. And I didn't get the book, but I always remembered it. And then, and that'll cut back to later when I discovered eBay.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. But, so I'll put a pin in that one right there. So anyway, as I was mentioning, I did work at Disney for the summer and Christmas seasons all the way through the end of college. I graduated in 1992, and I hightailed it out here to Disney World and have been ever since. Got a real job
at Disney.
Well...
Are you still casual temporary or
no,
part-time?
I did turn from casual temporary to permanent. But I still had the same job, selling ice cream. I guess I never mentioned what I did. I sold ice cream at Epcot.
Right. And not on this episode, yes.
Yeah. And that's actually where I met my best friend, Alex. Alex Wright. I know a lot of people have heard of him.
Following in the footsteps of many a famous Imagineer selling ice cream. Tony Baxter, but he was scooping it.
Yeah, he scooped ice cream. Alex and we sold ice cream bars, which we used dry ice, and so they were hard frozen, and we had to warn every guest about that. Safety. Yes. Because they stuck to your tongue.
I do remember that.
Yeah, but Alex has since gone on to become one of the the third generation Imagineers that presents at D23 and a lot of that. He's a good pal.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, he is. I did not become an Imagineer because I did not have the imagination that it took.
You sell yourself short, sir. There's
I know
lots of Imagineering positions, though.
That's true.
I've learned recently in the past, handful of years.
That's true.
It doesn't have to be necessarily creative. It can be
that is true.
Other areas.
And
but,
who knows
that's
where
another
my path
topic.
might lead. But anyway, so I moved out here permanently, found myself a place, and then eventually I worked at ticketing. Yeah, not ticketing at any of the individual parks, but kind of like admissions as a whole, where all of the paper tickets went. At the end
you
of
were
every
like
day, I
backstage
audited
stuff.
and did inventory of all the paper tickets, and then delivered them each day.
Get to drive into the parks a lot,
That's
right?
right. Yeah, we got one of our daily activities was to hop in a van and essentially collect all the ticket boxes from all the main entrance locations. And in order to do that, and this was before the parks would open, so we got to drive on Main Street in a van, or in the front of Epcot, which was a lot of fun. When you think about it.
Yeah.
So I've actually seen a lot of the entire Disney World property in the van, in the ticketing vans.
And you've got photos to prove. No, I'm just kidding. You don't.
No, heavens no. That's not right.
He doesn't. I'm kidding.
But that was a fun job, and I did that for a spell. And actually, it was while I was at that job, I helped develop the ticketing system that they now use when they went from paper tickets to the automated ticketing system. And so I actually helped with that with Blizzard Beach as well as Animal Kingdom. So I was officially part of the opening team of Animal Kingdom.
And he has a jacket to prove it.
I do.
That
not
one's
very
real.
cool looking, but it's
I think it's coming back in style now.
Hopefully.
It's a
It
jeans
doesn't really fit
jacket
very
with
well.
like those
The
different
big
colored
puffy
sleeves.
arms.
Yeah.
Yeah. but that's actually the only park that I've been to the opening of. On the opening day of Animal Kingdom, actually before I went to work that day, I made sure to be at the opening turnstiles. I was actually the first person through one of the turnstiles that day, and was the first person to ride Countdown to Extinction that day. The guy who was there, he actually was like, "You're our first guest," and he took my photo and sent it to me later, even though I had already ridden the ride many times during all of the cast previews. But on the opening day, I was the first one, and I actually met Joe Rohde that day.
Me too. Not really, but sort of. My mom did.
I got my photo taken with Joe Rohde on opening day of Animal Kingdom. It was kind of as he was on his way to all of the opening day festivities. So that was a lot of fun. But anyway, so from that, I did ticketing for a lot of years. I can't even remember how many.
And now all of that technology is obsolete.
It really is. Well, I was going to say, yeah, it was. But then I wanted to do something that was more along my personal interests, and so I moved to the libraries, and they had, in the backs of a lot of the work locations, they have kind of libraries. The one I worked at was for the Yellow Shoes, which was the creative group, the advertising group. And then I also worked at the Library and Research Center, which actually originated as Epcot Outreach, which was within Communicore. I don't know if you remember, Communicore West had a place.
Oh, I do.
Where people would be able to go and ask questions because Epcot was so new. Anyway, what that Epcot Outreach was then developed into kind of the behind-the-scenes library that I worked at. And so I actually worked with a lot of the people that worked at Epcot Outreach back in those days. So that was very cool, just to be able to learn from them all of the fun, opening nuggets of Epcot.
And now that's closed.
Yes, that eventually closed, and that's all right. I've since moved on.
Yes, you.
But anyway, it was because not because of that, but just because of my love of Disney. Right around, I think, March of 2000. That's when I discovered eBay.
Oh, right.
Which I told you I had a pin in that. I was like, wow, you could find all these books. Because I had a small collection of books, including the Epcot book, I think, which are behind me, and the Disneyland book by Randy Bright, The Inside Story. Those were kind of like my two big coffee table books. But I was like, I could get a lot more. And I think within a 2-month span, March and April of the year 2000, I had acquired, I think, 500 volumes of books.
Yikes, dude.
Which essentially created the library that I have now.
And they've had lots of babies since then and have grown exponentially.
Yes, I got a giant set of bookshelves to house them all. And because to me, you could, a lot of people, they do pins.
It's a good thing to collect.
Or stuffed animals or whatever. But to me, it's the information. So I just wanted books and all of the magazines, the Disney News, all of the annual reports and all
ephemera,
of that.
As it were.
Yes, ephemera. And all the park maps and that kind of thing. So I took to collecting those.
Very, very cool. I mean, it really is a great thing to collect for the history, and it's still going today. There, as long as although you cannot get them in stores as much, like the Disney parks and everything, which you used to always. There was always one place to get.
Yeah,
books.
I would always go to the places. There was 2 hours reading and writing at downtown Disney or the Village Marketplace. There was the place. There was a shop on Main Street. There was what was Ellen's bookshop?
The Writer's Stop.
A Writer's Stop, thank you. As well as a place in Epcot. There's always go-to places where I would find Disney books.
It's interesting that I guess you can find them every now and then, but it's really not. I guess just because of Amazon and stuff.
They've gone away from that.
Because they exist. There's new books being published all the time.
They just don't really showcase them as
nobody
well
wants
as
to carry a book around with them, I guess.
Yeah, and I know you can always get the Kindle version or whatever.
That would be silly.
Or iBooks. But to me, it's the thumbing through a book. And that's why you often see behind us.
Yes. This is
a lot of these
a very
volumes.
Short example of the many that exist.
But so my Disney library has become my baby. And I've got a few. And I've, as you said, I've acquired a few since those times. And it's tough to keep up. But that's kind of my thing now. And then one other thing about me was that in the most recent decade, I guess, if you will, in the early 2010s, I did have the fortune to travel overseas to check out the parks over there. Tokyo Disneyland, Hong Kong Disneyland, and even Disneyland Paris. I've not been to Shanghai yet.
That's because you met me and stopped traveling overseas.
We'll get to that.
No, that was when I first really started following you, I guess, I had followed you because you always had interesting conversations which I'll get to in the original days of Disney Twitter. But
yes.
When you were in Japan for the first time, that's when I was constantly retweeting you and being like, everyone should follow Disney. He's in Japan. It's amazing.
Yeah, back then it was a pretty unique thing.
It was. And then Tom Bricker came along and everyone goes there all the time forever.
Yeah, and I totally fell in love with Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Seas, and that place is amazing. I swear. I will take you. I promise.
I know. It's been me that's been stopping it because the idea of leaving my children for, 2 weeks at a time. But now they're getting older, so 2 of them can take care of themselves. So
that's right. So
we'll see someday.
Yes, I do promise. In fact, I'm making that promise. So
okay,
they'll have to hold me to it. But so anyway, I did get the fortune to see what those overseas parks were like, and Tokyo Disney is by far amazing, the most amazing place. They've certainly made some steps in the right direction in the other parks. They've opened some cool things, and I've heard great things about Shanghai and Aulani, and so we'll have to make sure to see all those. But it was also in that time, that's kind of when all of social media started happening to me. I think it was probably right around, it wasn't because of, but it was right around the time of the American Idol opening experience, the American Idol experience opening at the studios, that I actually joined Twitter and then, did this whole social media thing. And that's probably when I found WDW Radio, which is one of those podcasts I followed and listened to.
You may have heard of it.
Yeah, you may have heard of it. And then also, Twitter, and I think that's when I discovered Zanna Land. And eventually, I think through several meetings, meets of the month or whatever, we kind of joined forces.
That's one way to put it.
Brand united.
That's right.
I think I've been a detriment to your brand reputation.
Oh, stop. No.
Oh well. Here we are.
But yeah, and so, yeah.
Well, is that it? Is that your story?
Pretty much. I don't know if I've...
I didn't want to cut you off if you were done.
Yeah.
All
That
right.
is for the most part. There's probably little bits and...
Yeah, I mean, that will be the fun of the podcast as we continue on. Of course, we'll be adding more. We're not doing a whole play-by-play of our entire lives.
I could do that, but
although let me start by saying I was born. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so we'll, you can interject in my story as well.
And it's very possible that I will be like, oh wait, there's this one very important thing that I forgot to say.
Right, and we've been talking about doing this type of episode, this content for a while. And depending on the day of the week or, whatever's going on, I'll think of like, oh, this is what I'm going to say. And this is going to be great. I have all this stuff to say. And whatever that was a couple weeks ago, I have no idea because I did not write it down and I don't remember. 3 weeks
ago, I had thought about everything I was going to say and I had it all mapped out. I did not write it down.
Well,
and, so
it'll be a new episode when we remember things.
You got the one that you got. Hopefully that was slightly interesting.
The story of us part 12 will be, happening someday.
I don't want to short sell the meeting you part. That was certainly the most important.
That's very silly. You don't have to say that.
It seems like I kind of gave it short shrift at the end. But,
no, we all ended up together, so, they know how it ends.
It ended with this podcast.
And
but it'll
we're
continue.
out. Good night.
Anyway,
so
please tell us about where you came from. And
well, in going over what, my bullet points basically, and wanting to find corresponding blog posts just to reference for myself or photos or whatever, I realized I pretty much have talked about my whole story in every other episode. So I'll put it all together here, but this is probably not going to be news to anyone.
Bits of what I've said have been said before, but it's all fun to have it in one place.
So, if you're listening for the first time and you have no idea who we are, then this will be fun, I guess.
Who is Suzanne?
Well.
Or Zannaland?
I have no idea why my family first went to Disneyland. Disneyland. I'm already starting off with a bang with incorrect information. Walt Disney World. My parents met in Boston. That's where my mom is from. My dad he actually grew up in Ocala, Florida, and Jacksonville, and was stationed in the Navy for some reason in, I think, Scituate, Massachusetts. So I don't know. And he worked at the same, at this restaurant where my mom's first husband worked. And, she was already getting a divorce. It was the 50s or 60s or whatever. I don't know. She was, frowned upon for that, but whatever, man. She blazed a trail and met my dad. And so they got married. And I guess because he had lived in Ocala, his mom was still there and his family was still in Florida. So they visited her a few times. And I think my first visit to Walt Disney World as a result of that was when I was like 6 months old. So I have no memory of that. There are photos of me in my mom's photo albums of me visiting SeaWorld in one of the original little like whale or dolphin strollers that they had. Have you ever seen those
I've
before?
seen those, yeah.
So I was in one of those.
But would that make your first visit to Disney World in the year 74?
I guess so,
Because that was my first year of going to Disneyland.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny. Wow. We're learning things.
Same
yeah, but there's not really any pictures of me at Disney World back then on that day. I don't know why.
They might be somewhere.
But there are pictures of my sister and brother. Maybe it was 75 the first year. I don't know.
No.
I don't remember. My mom doesn't write the years down correctly, so
she was not a great historian.
Sorry, Mom, if you're listening, but anyway, so I have no memory of that. There's a picture of me like picking an orange from an orange grove. So we apparently visited that. over the years, I don't know if these were like multiple trips or different ones, but we had gone to Cypress Gardens, which I do definitely remember that because that is ingrained in my brain. And I don't remember really going to Busch Gardens, I don't think. But my mom talks about going and like it being so hot that like the asphalt was melting under her shoes. I don't know if that really happened or if she heard the Disneyland
opening
I don't know.
Day story.
It was hot. I'm sure, having lived here, I would agree that it was extremely hot.
Yes.
But in the late 70s, I guess at some point we went to Disney World, and I have very vague memories of that. And that is when I think I posted about it. Yes, this one. Sorry, I'm looking at various tabs I have open here. That was the picture of me with the frozen banana, which I'll give this to Christian to post. This is my grandmother right here, my dad's mom, my brother, me. Yeah. This is my sister, but she's cut off. Right in front of
Cinderella Castle.
Yeah, and I love the outfits that people are wearing in the background. So I have vague memories of that, not really too much as far as I think we stayed with my grandmother in Ocala and drove over for that visit. I could be wrong. Could be just making that up. I have no idea. Anyway, the big time was, which I talked about most recently on the Epcot episodes, when we went in 1983 after Epcot had just opened. And I guess because I'm sure, become a Disney fan at this point from going to the parks, and I liked it. My mom must have liked it because we went back. So I've never really talked to her about why she likes Disney. I should ask her sometime.
Yeah, like I've never really talked to my sisters. They all are Disney fans, but they're not as huge Disney fans
exactly.
as I am. That really only stuck with me.
And my brother and sister hate Disney, so like with a burning passion.
Yeah, none of my family hates Disney.
Yeah, we dragged them there a few times after that, but it wasn't for their enjoyment. Nope. Anyway, so that I told that story of how I had the Birn Baum book, and that's when I really read all about Epcot, and I had the countdown on the bathroom wall because we were redoing the wallpaper in there, and I had a giant marker that I would count down the days and made a dumb Mickey drawing. Oh. It was fun. And I had various assorted Mickey, toys and things like that. Some that I had inherited from my sister. There's one in my office where it still works, the pull string Mickey Mouse. Yeah. And he says, "I come from Walt Disney World. My name is Mickey Mouse." And there's a Donald. It really does sound like that. There's a Donald Duck toy that was always at my grandmother's house because she always had like leftover toys from when my brother and sister, who are 9 and 10 years older than me, so they had a different set of toys. Right. But I guess the Mickey could have been mine because it was from the 70s. Like if he says Walt Disney World.
Probably.
Anyway, the Donald one is like a tall thing, and you squish his hands and his legs move, so he kind of walked, and he's like half hard plastic. I should have brought these out for show and tell, but anyway, it was like I had toys and things, and I had a lot of weird albums. Somebody gave my mom one time a lot of like sing-along of the Disney movies, like the Aristocats and Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which I've still never seen that movie. But I know the songs from it because I had that album, and I forget what else, but there was a lot of fun albums. And then I had the official album of Walt Disney World, which is somewhere over there. I don't have that one.
And
then
them all. And the
Epcot was later. So my point was, it wasn't like I wasn't a Disney fan before I got to Epcot, but as mentioned in the Epcot episodes, I won't go into all of that again, but from the moment I walked in with the music swelling and the whole thing and Spaceship Earth and everything, it just like opened up a new section of my brain, basically, that wasn't used beforehand. And it really made me a lifelong Disney fan. So we actually, after our visit in 1983, I mentioned in the Epcot episodes that my mom was a ballet teacher. She was a former professional ballerina. My dad was always in the restaurant business, like a general manager, maitre d' kind of person. And they decided that they were going to leave all of that behind and open an ice cream store, a homemade ice cream store in Ocala, where he had lived before. And my cousins still lived there. My grandmother had passed away.
What a change.
I know. It's crazy. But I mean, I guess because he had the restaurant business background, he thought he could, make a go of it. And he did. I mean, it was successful. But I don't know. My parents just got bored easily or something because after 2 years, they sold that. The reason they sold it was hoping that person would keep it going, but they ended up selling it. So there's like no record of Susanna's Sweet Shop for the 2 years it existed.
I swear it
in
did
Ocala.
exist.
And I got to work there. So that was my first experience working when I was age like 12. I would work there on the weekends, close up the shop, and come home in time for Miami Vice on Friday nights. It was a good time. The 80s in Ocala. Lots of malls visiting.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I digress. Then we moved to Virginia, which I guess I didn't mention. I was actually born in Virginia. Why? I don't know. I don't remember. My dad's job, I think.
Moved so much.
This house that we're living in right now is my 27th move.
I believe it was my third.
In my life. So
Maybe fourth.
Yeah. That's another whole separate podcast experience from this one. But, well, my dad, being in the restaurant business in Virginia, he moved to like the Washington, D.C. area. He worked in the Capitol Hill Club then, which is like a fancy schmancy dining hall for the senators and the congressmen and stuff like that. He always told this story. This is another digression, sorry, of President Ford, like the TV that he was watching the election results come in on was broken, and he ran back to our townhouse in Fairfax and got his TV and brought it back for him to watch. No clue if that's real or not, but that was the story he always told. Anyway, I was born in Fairfax, Virginia. After that, we moved to Roanoke, Virginia, which is in the middle of the state near the Blue Ridge Mountains, and he worked at the Roanoke Civic Center. So he had lots of fun stories of acts that came there, like Kiss and Julie Andrews. He swore like a sailor.
Hello.
You won't hear that on any other podcasts. But and then after that, we moved to Clifton Park, New York for 2 years. I don't know what he did then. I was only 2. I don't know where I was going with this. Oh, we moved back to Virginia. Sorry, that was... When we left Ocala, we moved back to Virginia, and it wasn't like they had never been there before. I didn't remember it because I was only 2, but we moved to Lynchburg, which is right near Roanoke. Mm-hmm. And I went to 8th grade through 10th grade, the beginning of 10th grade there. And they opened a restaurant in Appomattox, Virginia, country restaurant, also named Susanna's. We did still visit Disney during that time. We would drive down and just go and see what was new. I don't have the timelines of things, but like when new hotels would open, we would, I guess, like choose to stay there.
That's cool.
I forgot to mention, oh my gosh, going back to my 80s visits before we moved to Ocala, that's when we stayed at the vacation villas.
That's right. I've thought you were going to talk about that.
I'm wearing the shirt.
That's a cool
Walt
shirt.
Disney World Village. I mean, that is a lot of my memories of going to Disney in the 80s is because we stayed at the vacation villas, which they don't exist anymore, but the property is now Saratoga Springs. So those Saratoga Springs, whatever they call them, they're not villas, but suites, I guess. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Disney Vacation Club rooms that overlook the
the
former Empress Lily. That's where we mainly stayed.
The ones that are right there that overlook the downtown Disney, which is now Disney Springs. Yeah,
yes.
Those ones.
And you can find information on this on various blogs, including my own a little bit, but mine, of course, is not as factual as others. But there was different kinds of vacation villas. There was vacation villas. There was the Fairway Villas. Which were on the golf course. The Club Lake Villas, which were kind of like fancier ones, I believe. And the Treehouse Villas, which I always wanted to stay in. I've still never been at one, and now they redid them, so it's not the same, but I still want to go. Anyway, that was a lot of the amazing memories I have over the years was staying there. And we did stay with my sister and brother there one time. And, I'm just going to keep it real. There was a lot of great memories and a lot of crazy memories in Disney as well with, parents fighting and things like that. So I always used to say that Disney was where some of my best and some of my worst memories were over the years. I mean, I'm an open book. You can ask me. I'll tell you anything. I'm trying to
I've
keep
heard
it.
the stories.
Yeah, trying to keep it brief here, but my point is, it was always, I don't want to say a safe place, but it was always just part of my life from that point on, and that was where we would always go. We never went anywhere other than either Maine or Disney on vacation, and that was it. I grew up spending summers going to Ogunquit, Maine, but once we moved to Ocala, we still went up for like a week or two, but we used to spend the whole month up there when I was little.
Oh.
I still love that as well. But anyway, my point was we did not travel the country or anything like you did that growing up, and that's where you got your
and I
love of
realized I
national
had forgot
parks
to
and all
talk
that.
about that.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll add that at the end.
Okay. Well, anyway, so we moved to Virginia, and then again, keeping it real, my dad left us, my mom and I. So we went back to Massachusetts because we could not live there by ourselves, and she was trying to run a restaurant and pay a mortgage and all that stuff. We since reconciled before he passed away. It's all good. That's another whole podcast that does not include this topic. But, you know, that's life. Things happen.
That's right.
Stuff happens. And, you know, Christian's making faces at me over there. It is part of who I am. And it made me, you know, appreciate and love the memories that I did have all the more. And again, when we did reconcile, he was in Jacksonville, and we would meet up at Disney. So lots of weird, awkward memories after that. But then, so I ended up in Massachusetts, where I had grown up after the New York part. We moved to Massachusetts, where my mom was from again. And I had lived there until we moved to Ocala. So now I was finishing high school there, went to college. I always thought I wanted to be a writer. And so I thought I would major in creative writing for children. I thought maybe I would write children's books. And college just wasn't working with me. And I don't know why, because I was really great in high school. I was in all AP classes. And then I got to college and I started having panic attacks and nervous breakdowns and all that kind of fun stuff.
Not for everyone.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wish me now had like stuck with it, and I didn't know what was going on with me. So my reaction was to not go to class. And so I took a semester off and tried to figure my life out after transferring to 2 different colleges. And I ended up going to a school where they had a travel and tourism management major. And they actually had a bachelor's program for it, which was unheard of at the time. And I don't know if it exists now. Anyway, I thought, I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to move to Florida and work at Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll see you later, mom and boyfriend. And they said, wait, we're going with you. So I actually got my associate's degree in travel and tourism management. If I had stayed one more semester, I would have gotten my bachelor's. But I said, no, I'll do that later. I'm going to go work for Disney. And I never went back to college. So anyway, then I moved to Orlando. I had my mom and my boyfriend at the time with me. We all got jobs at Magic Kingdom, at Walt Disney World. I was at Magic Kingdom. My mom was at All Star Sports, and the boyfriend was at Studios. So I lasted a little less than a year there. It turns out I'm a better guest than I am cast member.
It's fun to be a guest.
It is fun. You don't have to answer as many questions and deal with management. It was fun. I mean, I wish, again, I had stuck with it because, as you know, from being there for 20-something years, almost 30 now, I guess.
Close to 30. Yikes.
If you stick with it, then you can stay there forever. But I did not have that patience. I guess, well, whatever. Anyway. So I then left to work at a real travel agency because my goal was to work for the Walt Disney Travel Company, which I didn't realize you don't even need a college degree to do that. You can just go in off the street and get trained. But they weren't hiring when I went down there. So that's how I ended up on Main Street. And then I was like, well, I want to go actually into travel. So I worked at a travel agency, and then I got married, and then I had babies. And then I said, I want to live in Massachusetts again. And there was a lot of back and forth with that. But what I realized was I enjoy living within driving distance to Walt Disney World. So I finally realized in like 2003 or something that, hey, I'm going to move back here and stay here. And then we moved to Tampa, outside of Tampa, and that was what I was going to call the dark times. We both had dark times on our things because it wasn't like I suddenly didn't like Disney, but we just didn't go as often. I had 2 small kids, and it was like over an hour to drive there. And
that's a tough drive.
Yeah, so I was just like busy raising kids and being a mom and stuff. And then I heard about this little thing called the Walt Disney World Moms Panel.
Ah, yes.
And what's funny is my mom cut out a newspaper article for me for the first year that they did it. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And I like applied for it, but I never even like thought about it after that. I just like sent in my thing and then forgot it existed. So then between that year and the next time they were taking applications, that's when I started Zannaland, my blog, and that's when I discovered Disney Twitter, which again was a whole different place back then.
It was.
And because there wasn't like everyone and their mother with a blog and a podcast. It was
just a few.
There was like the old timers that had been there from the start, like Deb Wills and, you know, Lou to an extent had been there from the start as well. And I guess the Disney blog had always been
John
there.
Frost,
A Laughing Place and all that. But they were more like West Coast people. So then we were like the second wave of Disney blogs, like Amanda Tinney and myself and a whole bunch of others that may or may not still be blogging now. So I met more people and I saw moms panelists on Twitter and I was like, what? This is for me. I need to do this job. And I became obsessed with it, as I've talked about many times, and figured that that's what I needed to do. And that was my dream. And I applied and I chronicled the whole thing embarrassingly on my site. And
it's a good site.
Well, anyway, you can read those terrible blog
like
posts if you want.
And seeing it,
it's pretty funny. I mean,
I stumbled upon those recently and I was like, what is this?
Oh my gosh. Isn't that crazy? Here's the thing about me. I love to write. And when I write, it's very stream of consciousness. Very stream of consciousness. And then I forget. I like black out. And I don't remember what I wrote ever. So when I stumble upon those blog posts, I'm like, what did I say? Oh my gosh, this is terrible. But, you know, apparently keeping it real, which is what I've always tried to do, really resonated with some people. And that's how I grew with my following on the blog originally, was because of that. People would be, there was like the Diz boards, which was another thing that's been there forever, was where most of the applicants would get together and be like, I'm applying, it's my 3rd time or whatever. I guess it was only the 2nd year or so. And that's how we would all meet and talk to each other. And I didn't really ever take to the message board life. So I was like, well, I'm chronicling it over here on my site. And so people found me that way. I did get on the panel. It was the first ever part-time panelist they did, which I don't know if they were throwing me a bone to shut me up or what, because I was very vocal about the whole process. And I didn't actually make it through to the 3rd round. I got a thanks but no thanks email. Oh, wow. And I think I wrote a blog post that was like, well, it's come to an end or something ridiculous like that. And then I got another email that was like, oh, we sent you the wrong email. We're going to call you for your phone interview. And I was like, okay. I took what I could get. And, you know, so then they're like, well, we're going to give you a part-time panelist position, which means you don't get a week vacation at Disney World as your, you know, payment for being on the panel. You get a 4 and 5 day park hopper pass or something like that. And I was like, cool, I have annual passes, but thanks anyway. It was a fun experience though. But what that did, the reason why I'm telling this whole thing is, up until that point, I had been only a stay-at-home mom. I had just recently gone back to work part-time because I was like, I could do this at Starbucks before I had Gio, my youngest, who is now 11. And so I was doing that while the kids were in school, sometimes after school. And I was like, this is a great company to work for. I'm going to be a partner, assistant manager thing or whatever. And then I got pregnant with Gio which was on purpose because it was like my last chance to have a baby. Keeping it real. Anyway, I was 34. And so I was like, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be now. And I want to have another baby. So I did. And then I got on the moms panel. And prior to working at the Starbucks, I had just been a stay-at-home mom this whole time. I'd been very sheltered. My social anxiety, which developed when I was in college, was way worse at this point. Working at Starbucks had really forced me to be more personable and be able to talk to people and stuff like that. So that was one step. The second step was being involved in the moms panel and going on this moms panel training trip, which was, I forget how many days long it was now. It couldn't have been that long. 4 days, maybe 3 days.
Sure.
Something like that. It was long at the time for me. So I was leaving Gio for the first time, who was like a year old. Leaving my older 2 children for the first time ever. I had never done anything on my own. No girls trips, nothing. It was just me at home with the kids. And so that whole thing, that trip really was like very eye-opening for me. Like, wait a minute, I am a real person and I can be independent and I can do things that make me happy and all this stuff. And, I'm really sugarcoating this part of it, but that led to me realizing that I wanted to get a divorce. And there's many other reasons, which I won't get into, but one of them was realizing that, I wanted to do more with my life and do things that I wanted to do. And, bottom line is I married my high school sweetheart and we had both become very different people at that point in time. So anyway, keeping it real. So that developed over a span of years when I was blogging, and I did 2 stints on the moms panel that were both part-time. So it was just like a quarter that I answered questions. And I loved the people on there. I loved doing what I did. And I also realized that I wanted to do more of like the writing aspect and the blogging thing and stuff like that. We then moved to Celebration, Florida, which I had always wanted to live there. It was like my dream to live there. We were renting my dream house, and that's when I realized, wait a minute, this is not my dream. And so that's when I had to get a real job and work full time, and the blogging went downhill because of that. But, we've talked about this is what led me to this. I really wanted to do more things. I've always wanted to do a podcast with you. Oh yeah, in the middle of all that, this guy was, a very good friend of mine. Me and Nicole Scaretti Doyle, now Sparkly Nicole, we're great friends. We met through, back in the early days of Disney Twitter, people would meet up a lot, and there would just be like Disney Twitter meets or Lou's meets of the month or whatever. And I knew that you were like friends with Lou, but I didn't know who you were or anything. And like I said, I learned more about you from your trips to Japan. So you were hanging out with Nicole a lot because you were only working part-time, I guess, at that point. So you had a lot of free time in the parks. And Nicole had just moved to Orlando and was working at Disney. And she wanted to start a blog too. So I was, showing her the ropes of that. And we were all 3 hanging out a lot with little baby Gio. And so, yeah, and you were going through your own stuff, and then we became friends, and ta-da, we ended up together. Da, 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 da. And now everything's happy, and we love Disney. The end. I need to take a drink of water. That was a lot of talking. So, yeah, I mean, basically, Disney is part of my life, and part of your life. And I think, we all talk about being Disney fans, being fans of the parks, fans of the rides, fans of the movies. But I think it's just, for me anyway, I'm probably for you, it's just like the feeling that you got as a kid, and it's always been there as something to, go back to, I guess.
Yeah, because I remember even those times when I lived in Texas, kind of a thing that I did just to be able to bring myself back to Disney, my recent trips to Disney World that I just discovered, plus all, growing up in the Disneyland, I would like go for long walks and just kind of like just remember each attraction, each land, and kind of like compare the two between Disney World, Disneyland, and just I would just be able to entertain myself for hours, just kind of essentially telling myself the story of each of the places and kind of.
Didn't you make your own parks?
Oh yeah, I forgot.
In your room?
Like what?
That was a fun story. I remember.
What I used to do, like occasionally I would just be like, I would tell my younger sister Erin, "Hey, let's draw Disneyland, or let's create Disneyland." I had no artistic talents at all, or certainly model making talents. So they were, using toothpicks and pieces of paper or whatever. But so I would just, I would either like take a park map or one of the brochures and just like draw an attraction, or like try to make like an ice cream shop or something like that, just as a way of entertaining myself. Just that's just the places I went to.
Yeah.
Either whether it be telling myself stories of just each of the different attractions, or doing that. That's just kind of where my mind has always gone to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of always been there.
And I think because they're just so incredibly themed and themed well, authentically to a point, and we were just both there at the right time. And I think for the most part, my children have gotten the same feelings about Disney and have a love for it. I don't know if it's quite as immense as ours, but they like it there.
They do.
But it's just, it's always been a fun place to dissect and think about and learn the history of. I mean, for you, certainly you have all of that historical knowledge from all your books. And when I learn new things like that, that's always fun and exciting for me too.
Yeah, as like with the books, just kind of delving into all of the history of whether it be the parks or even the animation, or even just kind of the biography of Walt. It was just interesting to see all the little bits that connected.
Yeah.
Like, just something as simple as like the movie Fantasia kind of led to, that attraction at the World's Fair, which then led to Universe of Energy and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Whether it be kind of the development of Space Mountain from what it was, including the the Ward Kimball pieces which were on the Walt Disney Presents, whether it be Man on the Moon, Mission to Mars, that kind of thing, and just all the development of those kind of things, which then led into the development of Space Mountain. Just how there are so many interconnected pieces that I found through just reading about the history of it all. That's just always been very fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously why our podcast has got the history slant to it, because that's where the stories lie, for me anyway, is learning from the past. And so much of it was drawn from, a real place that's either embellished upon, or what if we took this real life thing and made it completely fantastical kind of thing. Like just the stories in general. I mean, I said I wanted to be a writer, so like that was always the interest to me, was the storytelling, and that can be done in many ways, not just speaking. It's in the architecture and the music and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, and certainly with the advances in technology, with the internet and all of that, and all of those amazing blog sites or websites that have a lot of that history. Plus, I would even say the creation of D23. And the D23 expos that have come out, and all of the Destination Ds, where they would bring together all of the people that created all of this, and they would present those kinds of things. That's just an amazing thing. I am lucky that I have been to every day of every D23 expo, every day of every Destination D, both Epcot 30, Epcot 35, as well as both scavenger hunts. That's just, I just cannot get enough of that stuff. And even before the creation of D23, they would have those kinds of things at Disney, even kind of like behind the scenes cast things that I used to go to, not just tours of a lot of the attractions behind the scenes, but things where like the ambassadors, the Disney World ambassadors would like put together a presentation, or even Jim Korkis, who was a big resource back then at the parks. Just for cast members, I would go to all those presentations that and I had a job at that time where I was able to get out a lot and go to those kinds of presentations. But I just love that kind of thing, and so it's certainly been advanced now with the development of the internet. Plus
I
D23.
think all of that stuff has just exploded, and it's great that there is an interest in it. It does cause a lot of strife sometimes on Disney Twitter and the internet, with people agreeing and disagreeing, and very passionate about what they love and think should happen or shouldn't happen. Yeah. But it's all
I do like the passion. But yeah, I don't really care for strife.
No.
So I stay far from that.
Yes.
I just want to learn.
Yeah. And I think, for me, I certainly grew up, for the most part, just with a very fluffy view of Disney, and it was all sunshine and sparkles to me. I loved what I loved because it was part of my, to me, perfect childhood, and I had those amazing memories. And it's only been in, recent years that it was more than just my personal history that I was interested in. It was the park's history and all of that fun stuff. And you've certainly opened many doors for that knowledge to be had and all that fun stuff. So I couldn't do this without you, of course, because I would just be sitting here rambling my soap opera of a life.
There's no way I would have been able to do this without you, because I didn't have the wherewithal to make all of this happen, and I certainly didn't have the blog to draw back from, because I don't have that.
And we wouldn't be here at all without Christian, who hates when I call him out on a podcast, but he really is. But I guess that will. I'm glad we didn't drag this on for multiple episodes.
There are probably people saying, "Wait a minute, but you did drag it on." Oh,
well,
like multiple episodes.
Like when we first talked about doing this, I'm like, this is definitely going to be 2 episodes at least.
Yeah,
and Christian's
I did leave out kind of some details about just kind of
it's just like a bullet
strolling
point
through
timeline.
the parks and all of that. But
this was just how we came to be both together, and how we came to be where our level of interest and love and history of Disney parks
and
is.
For those of you who have been watching or listening to each one of our episodes, this is kind of probably a nice encapsulation, or just kind of like, hey, okay, we've heard all of these things, but who are we? Who are the people
if you're
behind
starting
all of
out
this?
on episode 3 and are like, who are these clowns? Here's your answer.
That's right.
So thank you for listening.
Yes.
If you're just listening for the first time, we will have many more episodes with interesting topics that we're working on presently.
That's right.
You can listen to the old stuff, of course, as well. We always have the audio version and on YouTube, which you could be watching on right now.
Hello.
And we will have an accompanying blog post with more information, which I don't know what we're going to put in it. This one, because it's just our personal stuff, but
Pictures
we'll still
of
do
us? No, I don't know.
We'll do no, never mind. Anyway, thank you for listening if you've listened this whole time. And like I said in the beginning, we want to hear your story too. So drop us a line, send us a comment wherever you're watching or listening to this.
Please.
Or on Disney Twitter, where you can find us. On that blog post, we'll link all of our names. It's also on YouTube. So thank you again. Yeah, Zannaland, that's me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing and liking and subscribing. All of that stuff helps us to know we should keep going and doing what we think is fun. But it's more fun if we hear from you and know that other people are having fun.
That's
also.
right.
So thanks for joining us up the waterfall.
Bye now.